Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with fabulous concert programs number... what number is it? It's number 59. Oh, we're moving up there. That's a lot of concerts, isn't it? Gives you something to do in your copious free time, because we're never going to hear these really in a concert. We can only create the concerts in the comfort and convenience of our own homes. And that's sometimes the best place to be, I have to say. We are in the middle of our Dvořák Cycle, well, really close to the beginning of it, with Symphony No. 2, another one of Dvořák's least popular symphonies. But unlike No. 1, which Dvořák wrote and sent off to Germany and it disappeared and you never saw it again, No. 2 was actually revised for performance. He wrote it in 1865. It was performed in 1888, once in his lifetime. And that is the only time he ever heard it. And after that, it just disappeared. And it's really a shame because he did revise it, which meant he thought something good was in it. And there's quite a lot of good in it. It just needs to be understood for what it is. Now, what is it then? Beethoven wrote a pastoral symphony. Everyone knows that. Dvořák wrote 3 pastoral symphonies. He didn't call them that, but that's what they are. They are numbers 2, 5, and 8. They are notably bucolic in character, relaxed, beautiful, and the second is the first, and it's the most immature, and it's the longest by a wide margin. Like the first, it's nearly 50 minutes long, and Dvořák wrote it right after the first. It's kind of amazing. But the influences on this symphony are very, very interesting, and this program is designed to highlight that. But let's talk about the symphony a little bit. The problem most people have with it, and I did too until I sort of figured it out, because it's very original work in its way, is that the first 2 movements are a little bit on the droopy side. That is, they're relaxed. They're very beautiful. I mean, they're gorgeous. The piece is already of a personality and strength of melodic character that could have come from nobody else. But the first movement is constructed in a way such that the main themes are all very lyrical and mellow, and there are 3 of them. And the transitional material, the motion music, that's very exciting. And gradually, as the movement goes on, the more rambunctious stuff takes over. But the general impression that the music gives, because it has a slow introduction that rises to a climax that eases into the first subject, is that the music is constantly relaxing. You know, you have a theme, and then as it works up to a climax, and then it eases into the next theme, then that has a climax, then it eases into the next theme. So the result is a sort of systemic decrescendo. And that is not a recipe for formal success, let's face it. It's not that the music is dysfunctional in any particular way. It's that the emotional impression it gives is this constant return to this just really nice, lyrical, mellow, sunny disposition. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. But it's a long movement. And so you have to kind of just accept it and get on with that fact, and you'll enjoy it because it's extremely enjoyable music. Now, the second movement is a big, long, slow movement. Also, it's sort of ABA form. It's pretty straightforward with an introduction, which returns at various points to separate the sections. The influence and I think inspiration for this movement is really quite fascinating. Dvořák at this point in his life was in love, and he wrote his Cypresses, the love songs, which became a string quartet cycle, a series of love songs at that time. And he was that was on his mind. He was 24 years old. I mean, give the guy a break, right? And the second movement is love music, but of a very special kind. In 1864, the year before the symphony was written, Smetana conducted a performance of Berlioz's Romeo and Juliet. Dvořák was in the orchestra in Prague. And I think the love scene from Romeo and Juliet really stuck in his mind. And this is the effect of that love scene. There are no similar themes. It's a similar concept, that sort of nocturnal, rich, yummy atmosphere, the beautiful lyrical themes, the songful woodwind writing, the more agitated central section. If you listen to the love scene from Berlioz's Romeo and Juliet, which is also quite long, it's like 14 or 15 minutes long, and then you listen to this movement, I think the identity, that the model is very, very clear. Even though the two composers are writing in their own style, and Dvorak is certainly not copying anything directly, but the inspiration, the concept is very, very similar. Now, after that second movement, the symphony really starts to wake up. The Scherzo is absolutely a work of genius. No one else could have written it. It is delicious. It contains one of Dvorak's first train tunes inspired by locomotives. Da 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 da, cha da 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 da, ba dum ba dum ba dum ba da, dum ba dum bum bum ba. Oh, it's wonderful. It has more hummable tunes in it. The very opening, ya da 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 ba da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 dum ba da dum. Oh God, it's gorgeous. It's so beautiful, and it doesn't have like any internal repeats. You know, the form is almost through composed. The trio section has a tune that sounds like "I've been working on the railroad." It's like that, and the introduction. Every movement has an introduction. The introduction of the Scherzo is a development of the introduction of the first movement, thus unifying the work cyclically somewhat. I mean, it's just one of the most beautiful of all of Dvorak's early movements, and it's totally successful. And you just want to hear it over and over and over, and I love every second of it, and so will you. And then the finale is zippy. It's a lollapalooza of terrific tunes. I mean, it begins with a sort of ominous, dark, it does that a few times. And then this wonderful tune breezes in. Ya-da-da-da, ya-da-da-da-da-da-da, ya-da-da-da-da. I mean, you know, this whole symphony you could sing. Even that nice, relaxed first movement. Similar to the theme of the finale, you may note. And then there's a gorgeous second subject. Oh my God, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's big, wide-ranging thing under Ponticello string tremolos. That sort of metallic sound. Oh, it's incredible. And it rises to this enormous climax. And even the ending is distinctive. You know, the final chords have this sort of, this disturbing tremolo in the cellos and basses. It's, you know, dum, bum, 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 and they're going underneath going, whomp, you know. Oh, it's just fantastic. By the time it's over, you're going to be thrilled. But it takes a bit getting into those first two movements, which means that in performance, you should never take the exposition repeat in the first movement. Never. Big, big mistake. But I think that the symphony is so beautiful. And like I said, it's a big work, but it has to go first on the program. And the reason it has to go first is because those first two movements really require a certain amount of freshness and concentration. And I think that if the audience is sitting there fresh and they hear this beautiful opening, these lovely themes, they're not going to be bored at all. It's going to be just fine, and they'll get through it. And as the symphony wakes up, as it goes, because it really takes off for the third movement, you're home free. So that's the opening. And I think that's a really novel and interesting way to open a concert, because the second half is going to be quite intriguing. It's what I call a Berlioz symphony that is not any of Berlioz's symphonies. It's orchestral movements from other works that create a four-movement, well, you know, symphony/suite/something. But I wanted to have a program that included the love scene from Romeo and Juliet, because the inspiration of the Dvorak, I think, will be clear to very many listeners, even though, like I said, it's not a copy, but they'll have that familiarity. And I also think that the love scene from Romeo and Juliet takes a little work, because that's really long. And so having those two pieces on the same program, I think, is a wonderful way to get to know two works that don't always get the credit that they deserve for being as beautiful and marvelous as they are. And if you can do it while making everything else exciting so that people don't fall asleep and pass out from boredom, you're in really good shape. And therefore, the rest of the second half consists of the ball scene from Romeo and Juliet, which is just, you know, wow, incredibly succulent and exciting. And then the Queen Mob Scherzo, which is also just delicious and gossamer and uses antique cymbals, which I've played ding, 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 delightful. Then you get the love scene as the slow movement of this four-movement symphony. And you end with the Radetzky March from the Damnation of Faust, which makes a fantastic concert conclusion. It'll have everyone on their feet. And I think that's really a lot of fun. And believe it or not, they sort of go together. You know, we don't really study the influences on Dvorak. Dvorak was like Mozart. He was a musical sponge. He soaked up everything from everywhere. And you know, in that respect, you know, he was, you know, in Dvorak's day, you didn't go to a conservatory and learn to be a composer. You were a practical musician, and if you were lucky, you might get private tutelage from someone who could teach you some things about composition. But Dvorak was essentially self-taught. He learned from experience. And as an actual performer in a theater orchestra for a long time, he really had a lot of experience. And then he studied scores. He studied music. He studied Beethoven. But, you know, Berlioz played in Prague in 1846. He was known there. Dvorak knew a lot of French music. People only talk about like Brahms or Beethoven or Mozart. And Dvorak, of course, was more interested in pushing the German connection because his publisher was Simrock, who was Brahms's publisher. But he spent his life in the orchestra playing operettas by Lecoq and Offenbach and people like that. And he knew his Verdi. He knew his Verdi cold. In fact, if you listen to Caro Nome from Rigoletto, which Dvorak played at its Prague premiere, before he wrote his Second Symphony. There is in the Second Symphony a wonderful little woodwind codetta. You hear it in Caro Nome. At the very end, it goes da 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 da. Well, that little bit pops up in the Scherzo of Dvorak's Second Symphony. A little reminiscence of Verdi, perhaps. There's more than a lot in Dvorak and many other composers who claim to be pure Germanic whatevers. It was all nonsense, of course. Anyway, so there we have it. Dvorak's Second Symphony with a second half that consists of Berlioz, really cool Berlioz movements arranged to provide a satisfying program and which may have inspired Dvorak in very intriguing ways. A thoughtful program, I think. Certainly a thoughtful program for you to listen to at home because, of course, no one's ever going to play it live. So there you go. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.